Hey, it's Chris Larson from the Paul Korn Bow Hunting Channel, and I'm here with Paul Korn from the Paul Korn Bow Hunting Channel. Today we're going to talk about something that when you get out there and you start talking to hardcore archers, they're probably going to laugh.
I've had that happen.
You've had that happen.
Yeah.
We're talking about the almighty Whisker Biscuit rest.
Oh.
Ooh, those are only for beginners, right? Paul, why do you use a Whisker Biscuit?
You know, when I started shooting, I'll tell you, if I go back to the very roots of it, Dan Allison, my partner, when the Biscuit first came out, he started putting them on bows. And he set a couple of them up on some hunting setups for some adults. And to me, I thought it was the ultimate kids rest. And so anyways, I'm like, what are you doing? Why don't put that on someone that needs to shoot super accurate's bow. And he said, well, it does shoot accurate. I took it down to the range and it shoots great. So anyways, I remember I told him, put some broadheads on and go back to 60 yards and see how it groups. And so I'm kind of known as the Whisker Biscuit guy, but Dan, when he was like 19 years old, is the one that got me really started on it. And so he came back and he said, and Dan, of course, Dan started shooting at a very young age, and he was a very proficient archer when he was in his late teens. And he's
back
like,
in his prime.
Yeah, definitely in his prime. He's not like Little John, where you just you can hold your prime all the way through to your 50. But and he's like, yeah, it shoots great. I'm like, so I tell him, I'm like, Dan, set one up on my bow, and I'm going to take it out and I'm going to shoot it. And so I was like the most negative, because once again, some of the other podcasts and stuff we've done, we're talking about ozone. You can't see it, and it's like, well, how do you know it's really there? How do you know it really works? But over time, yourself and the market proves it out. So he sets his bow up for me, and I go down and I shoot it, and I'm like, are you kidding me? That's especially 20 years ago, it was as accurate as anything that I'd ever shot. Of course, we're shooting TM hunters and flipper rests and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, this thing is really accurate. So I started hunting with it, and and I go back to like I've used fall away rests, I've used limb drivers, it was made by Vapor Trail, very good rest. I've used just a bunch of different fall away type rests, and I always seem to go back to the Whisker Biscuit. And I'll tell you why. Number one, it completely traps your arrow. So you have an arrow holder built in. And I do a lot of different kind of hunting. I go from sitting over a bait for a bear to spot and stalk mule deer or chase an elk up in the mountains. And when you start doing a stalk and you can just put your arrow through this biscuit, lay it in there, not have to worry about it coming out, have it blowing off your rest, it's super simple, and it just works really well for a hunting setup. And then so people will say, well, your arrow's going slower when it goes through there. All the testing we've done, you're talking about a foot per second. It hits those bristles, you're losing about 1 foot per second. But, as far as just being able to keep your arrow on the rest and knowing that you don't have to worry about that means a lot. And as far as accuracy, I really honestly believe if it's set up correctly, it is very accurate. I've had people tell me that they put the Biscuit in a shooting machine in their groups. I had one guy tell me that he felt sorry for people that used them because he put it in a shooting machine, and his groups were so big. He had like 4-inch groups at 20 yards, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense because you're telling me I can outshoot a hooter shooter? No, I can't. I know I can't. But it needs to be set up correctly, and probably the most important thing when setting it up is on the Biscuit. They have this. They have the stiffer bristles in the bottom, the black section. Yep. So you always want to make sure that when you load your arrow, that your odd feather or your cock feather is up, so that when it goes through the rest, it's not hitting the stiff bristles. They do that because it wears better by having the stiffer bristles. The other bristles are softer. Mm-hmm. So if you put it in backwards, or you put it with the odd feather or the cock feather down, and it hits that, so it's hitting the hard veins with one vein and then the soft veins with another, it does affect the flight, and quite honestly, it's not real pretty. So it is important that you have your arrow orientated correctly so that it so that it can get out of there. But we sell hundreds of these each year, and they shoot good, they tune good, they're simple. And I mean, I've held, some very incredibly tight groups out to 100 yards with a biscuit, and I've taken I shot my stone sheep at 88 yards with a biscuit on my bow. And at the time, I was actually hunting with Randy Almer, and I remember we got there and we went to shoot. We did a 2-on-1 hunt in British Columbia, and he's like, "You shoot that?" I mean, he's like, and then we went to the range and shot, and he's like, "Wow, that thing shoots good." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, I'm telling you." But I think it's kind of one of those things, you look at it and you write it off before you even start, and you think it's a kid's rest or whatever. But very, accurate, easy to tune, easy to set up. Now, of course, the first, the first version didn't have like the dovetail bracket and stuff, but now a lot of adjustment, really easy to set up. It's super simple, quiet. You got everything going for you. So that's why I shoot it.
Yeah. So Outdoor Life actually did exactly what you're saying. They tested a bow with one of the top end drop away rests, and then they tested the same bow. They had everything set up, well for both rests, and then they shot the Whisker Biscuit through a Hooter shooter and did an accuracy test. And what they found was at 30 yards, we were talking about tenths of an inch difference in the groups. I mean, it was, and they kind of came to the same conclusion that what we're hearing right now about, this is only for archers who aren't serious, is a myth, and that you're getting the same accuracy you can get out of the fall-away. And like you say, you are getting basically a rock solid thing. There's not a lot that can go wrong. Is there a time where you had this set up and you were like, I'm so glad I have this and not have something else?
I can't even tell you. I can tell you when I didn't have it, I was actually hunting feral goats in Hawaii, and it was windy. And the wind it can be positive and negative. And so it was so windy that I was able to get within 20 yards of a whole bunch of feral goats. It was so windy when I went to draw back, it blew the arrow off my rest. And it's like it kept blowing it off the rest, and I'm like, and that was actually the year before I started shooting this, and that's what really made me. I'm like, man, I couldn't shoot. I was trying to hold the arrow on my TM Hunter, and it would literally, that was, you're talking 30-mile-an-hour gusts would blow my arrow right off, and I'm like, man, I would have given anything to have that rest that day. So I think after a while, once you start using something like this, you kind of take it for granted. And you don't even really think about it. So you're taking that for granted, and then what'll happen to me is that I'm going, let's say Will Primos invites me to go on an elk hunt, and I'm going to go on an elk hunt, and I'm like, well, I already shoot pretty much, the items that they use. Tight spot quiver, you can see the Montana Black Gold sight, Matthews bows. This bow is set up with everything that I really like. I got gold tip arrows, I've got everything I like, but the only thing that I don't have that's not politically correct with who their sponsors are is the Whisker Biscuit. But where I'll notice it is I'll go on a hunt like that, and I'll be like, I'll throw a drop away on there, and then I'll go elk hunting and I'll start stalking, and the ding, it's like, now I got to think about it again. How do I keep the arrow on the rest? And I got to have some other little special holder, and I think Dan Ellison years ago said almost any product for archery, if you really want to make it simple, you ask yourself, does it make it easier to do it? Is it going to make your hunt easier? Is it going to make it easier? And the answer is yes on this. You don't have a string tied to your cable. You don't have to worry about that breaking. You don't have to worry about trying to keep the arrow on the rest. All that goes away when you go with this. So, and you may be sacrificing so little accuracy, it's unnoticeable. And some people will say, well, if you've got bad form and you drop your bow arm, well, you don't want to have a biscuit on there because you'll pull the whole arrow down. And I'm like, come on. If you have bad form, if you swing the golf club, you Happy Gilmore style, and you're running up to the ball and hitting it. If your form is bad, your form is bad. You have to have good form. You got to figure out how to pull it off. But just the basics of keeping the arrow on the rest and keeping it in the game, because you got a chance. If you got an arrow in there and you got it on the rest, you're in the game. And so that's why I really notice I'm missing it when I'm without it for a little while. And it's like I said, this bow here is all set up with everything that I like. Now, if I was going to go hunt with Primos, the only thing that they would really prefer that and even Will, I know he doesn't have a problem with this rest. They used to shoot for Trophy Ridge. Trophy Ridge bought Carolina Archery out, And he had one on his bow for several years, but they've gone a different direction. And he shoots. I mean, what they're shooting now is very accurate and very good quality stuff. And we probably still sell more drop away rests than anything at A1 Archery, but great product, just solid. I like it.
So is there a situation, you talked about, we do still sell a ton of drop away
Oh,
rests.
yeah.
And just people know that that's what you use. Is there a situation where you'd say, the way you should go is drop away rest compared to this?
I really can't think of anything. I mean, I really can't. I mean, they're quiet. I mean, when do you want, even, I can tell you, even just switching around from one side of the tree to the other. How many times, like I film a lot of people, and you probably notice when you watch the Paul Korn bow hunting channel, I film way more than I hunt. I mean, for every one hunt that I do, I probably film 3 or 4. Do you know how many times, where I'm filming a deer hunt and there's a deer on this side of the tree and the hunter needs to switch over and they lift their bow up and the arrow falls off. I'm hearing clanging and banging and them trying to get, the arrow back on the rest. I don't want to have to think about that. And, I really honestly cannot think of a situation where you'd want to, where you wouldn't want to have one of these in a hunting situation.
Okay. Is there anything about the Whisker Biscuit that I didn't ask you that's important?
I think, they've made changes through the years, but maybe is it quiet, which I think it is. Sometimes if you get the right arrow combination and the bristle combination, it can make a little noise. So you'd want to make sure that, that you once again, just like anything, you practice with it and make sure that it's quiet. Sometimes if your arrow gets wet, it can, there's things that can go wrong with it. I mean, you can shoot it and wear the bristles out. So you want to keep an eye on it. It's just like any other kind of wear item. But I would just say, practice with it, use it in all different situations. And once you get it dialed in, you really just set it and forget it. I mean, you don't have to worry about anything other than loading the arrow up on there and go hunt,
Perfect. Well, for Paul, I'm Chris. Thanks for joining us on the Paul Korn Bow Hunting Channel and the Paul Korn Bow Hunting Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Chris.